Some stories are so incredible, they just don't feel like history. They feel more like myth. They're these epic tales of human will being pushed to the absolute razor's edge of breaking, all set against a backdrop so hostile it might as well be another planet. And today, we're going to dive into one of the greatest of them all, the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton and his men, a crew who waged a war, not against other people, but against the single deadliest continent on the face of the Earth. Right from the start, these are the words Shackleton himself chose to dedicate his own book about the journey. Think about that for a second. He didn't see it as an expedition that went wrong or a scientific trip that failed. No, he saw it as a battle. He called it the White Warfare of the South. And really, what a fitting name for a struggle that would demand more raw courage and sheer endurance than any battlefield imaginable. So, what was the plan? Well, after the South Pole had finally been reached, this was it. This was the last great unconquered prize of the heroic age of exploration. The idea was just breathtakingly audacious. Sail into the Weddell Sea, one of the most treacherous bodies of water on Earth, land a party, and then march 1,800 miles. Let that sink in. 1,800 miles across the entire unknown frozen continent to the Ross Sea on the other side. A journey nobody had ever even attempted. Now, to pull off something this ambitious, you need a very special kind of ship. And they had one. Her name was Endurance. Every single piece of her, every timber, from the oak and the pine to this incredibly dense wood called greenheart, it was all chosen to make her the strongest wooden vessel of her time. She wasn't just a ship, she was their fortress, their transport, their hope, designed specifically to fight the Antarctic ice and win. For 1,000 miles, she did exactly what she was built to do. She battled through the pack ice of the Weddell Sea. But then, in January of 1915, just one single day's sail away from their landing site, the ice closed in. And this time, it just didn't let go. The strongest ship in the world was trapped, caught fast. For 10 long months, they were helpless prisoners, just drifting with the ice pack. And then the pressure began. Imagine these immense unseen forces driving massive plates of ice together, squeezing the ship like it was a toy. The mighty timbers groaned, and then they cracked with these sharp reports that sounded just like gunfire. And finally, the Endurance, their fortress, was broken. 28 men were suddenly forced to abandon ship and set up camp on the unstable frozen sea. On their very first night living on the ice, the temperature just plummeted. And this wasn't some temporary cold snap. This was their new reality. Surrounded by the mangled wreckage of their ship, with nothing but thin tents for shelter, the men had to face the brutal, immediate truth of their situation. Civilization was gone. They were completely, utterly alone. Their entire world, everything they knew, shrank down to the size of a single massive ice floe. They even gave their miserable little settlement a name, Patience Camp, which is a grimly appropriate title for the months and months of waiting that lay ahead of them. They were completely cut off, just drifting north with the currents, praying the ice would carry them towards open water, and not just into oblivion. What's so fascinating here is how this table shows their new reality. The old world, the world of money and possessions, was totally meaningless. Shackleton ordered every man to limit his personal belongings to just 2 pounds. Suddenly, 3 small lumps of sugar became a daily treasure, and the hope that anyone would find them, that was a flat zero. They knew they had to save themselves. And this quote just brilliantly captures that shift in their minds. Shackleton himself took a handful of gold sovereigns and just threw them into the snow, calling them useless weight. But then he saw one of the crewmen about to toss a pack of playing cards, and he stopped him, saying, "We'll need them." You see, tangible mementos of home, like photographs, became more precious than gold. What mattered now was whatever could sustain the human spirit. You can only imagine the mental strain. It was immense. Food became a total obsession. One man literally spent an hour frantically digging in the snow for a dropped piece of cheese the size of his thumbnail. To fight off the crushing monotony, they'd read their few remaining books, which actually led to these furious arguments over random entries in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Shackleton himself kept only a single page from a Bible, with this haunting verse from the book of Job that spoke directly to their frozen world. After an unbelievable 497 days living on the ice, their fragile home just disintegrated right from under their feet. The floe they had called Patience Camp shattered into pieces, throwing them and all their meager supplies into the frigid Antarctic Ocean. Their only chance, their last hope, was to take to 3 small open lifeboats they had managed to salvage from the wreckage of the Endurance. After a week of pure hell at sea, they finally made landfall on this desolate, completely uninhabited rock called Elephant Island. Okay, it was shelter, but it wasn't salvation. Nobody would ever find them there. So Shackleton faced an impossible choice. He decided he would take 5 men in the strongest of the lifeboats and attempt an 800-mile ocean crossing to find help, leaving the other 22 men behind to wait. And just look at this matchup. I mean, it's insane. Their vessel was the James Caird, a tiny 22.5-foot lifeboat, an open boat. And their opponent, the Drake Passage, in winter, a stretch of water that Shackleton knew was the most violent, most tempestuous, storm-swept ocean on the entire planet. It was a mission that wasn't just dangerous, it was bordering on madness. For 17 straight days, they were locked in this constant, desperate battle for their lives. Hurricane-force winds threw these mountainous waves at their tiny boat. Freezing ocean spray coated the boat in tons of ice, which they had to chip away at constantly, day and night, or they would become top-heavy and capsize. They were perpetually soaked, freezing cold, and tormented by an agonizing thirst. And yet somehow, through brilliant navigation and just sheer, unbelievable will, they found the tiny island of South Georgia. But their ordeal still wasn't over. Of course it wasn't. They had landed on the wrong side of the island. The final brutal obstacle was a 36-hour non-stop trek across an unmapped, glacier-filled mountain range no one had ever crossed. Utterly exhausted, frostbitten, they finally stumbled down the other side. And then they heard it. A steam whistle from the whaling station. The first sound of the outside world in almost 2 years. They had done it. They had reached civilization. But for Shackleton, the ordeal was far from over. His very first words to the whalers weren't about his own incredible survival, but about the 22 men he had left behind. He had promised them he would return. Now he had to somehow fight his way back through the Antarctic winter to keep that promise. What followed was just an agonizing 4 months of failure. The first ship he managed to secure was turned back by an impenetrable wall of sea ice. The second one suffered engine failure. A third attempt, in a small wooden schooner, was also defeated by the winter ice pack. I mean, each failure must have been a crushing blow, but Shackleton just refused to give up. For his fourth and final attempt, he practically begged the Chilean government for a small, unstrengthened steamer called the Yelcho. Meanwhile, back on Elephant Island, things were absolutely desperate. The men were living under 2 of their overturned boats. Their food stores were almost gone, and with each passing day, hope was fading. They scanned the horizon constantly, but for 4.5 long months, they saw nothing but ice and empty ocean. Their survival was hanging by the thinnest of threads. Then, on August 30th, 1916, one of the men thought he saw something through a brief break in the mist. He screamed, "Ship O!" At first, the others thought it was just another cruel mirage, that his mind was playing tricks on him. But then they all saw it. It was the Yelcho. After 128 days of waiting, rescue had appeared out of nowhere. As the small rescue boat got closer to the shore, Shackleton, standing right there in the bow, yelled out the one question that had tormented him for months. "Are you all well?" And the answer came back across the water, clear and strong from his second-in-command, Frank Wild. "All safe, all well." And that brings us to the single most astonishing fact of the entire Imperial Trans-Antarctic expedition. After nearly 2 years stranded in the most hostile environment on this planet, after their ship was destroyed, after they lived on drifting ice, after that 800-mile voyage in a lifeboat, this is the number of men from Shackleton's immediate party who were lost. 0. Not a single one. Years later, Shackleton reflected that they had lost everything you could touch and hold, their ship, their equipment, their original goal. But what they had gained, he said, was something far deeper. In his words, "In memories we were rich. We had pierced the veneer of outside things. They had seen the raw truth of survival and the profound, unbreakable depths of human loyalty." You see, the story of the Endurance isn't really about a failed expedition. It's a testament to incredible leadership, to human resilience, and to the unbreakable bonds that can be forged in the face of absolute despair. And it leaves all of us with a really fundamental question about our own nature. When everything is gone, when all hope seems lost, what is it deep inside of us that refuses to surrender?